the time. This is the guy that really's done more for Fredonia than I have.
How so?
It can be, just,
What has he done for Fredonia?
He doesn't follow the Sermon on the Mount. He hides his light under a bushel.
Mm-hmm.
And he really shouldn't, because he has a great light that people respect him for it.
Mm-hmm. What else can you tell me about Jim Summer?
Well, if I had a brother, that's who I'd like him to be like.
Mm-hmm.
you're extremely kind.
We talked about that before.
You are the living example of stewardship mentioned in the Bible, and you will remember that we've had many conversations about that.
Yep. But I still think you should accept the honors that should be you have turned down.
Mm-hmm. Why would Mr. Summer, who I respect greatly, say that you are the limelight of stewardship? Why would he even think like that? What is it about you that makes you so unique?
Well, you got me stumped on that one, because actually, I always figured that this town gave me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give back some.
Mm-hmm.
My kids are well taken care of. My family's well taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And so, therefore, I want to do for the others.
Mm-hmm. Your family has always been very charitable. And I think that's been part of corporate responsibility for Dunkirk and Fredonia Telephone. Did that start with your father?
Well, you know my family history. I'm not going to go into that, but my father...
No, I don't. No, I don't. That's exactly. We're doing this for your grandkids, great-grandkids, etc. Let's talk about your family history.
Well, my mother and father were splitsville before I was born. My mother married at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was born actually in my grandparents' house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm perfectly legitimate. Everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not what some kid called me sometime when I was a little fella, but I was raised by my grandparents.
Mm-hmm. And your grandparents' names were?
Maytums.
And first name?
Arthur R. and Gertrude Prushaw Maytum. She was French-Irish and he was English.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to this country, as a poor boy. He had nothing when he got here. He was, and I think that he felt sorry for other people that came that way. In fact, many of the early Italian families that came to Fredonia, some of the older ones had told me when I was younger that if it hadn't been for him, that their parents would have starved the first year they got here, because he was in the grocery business.
Mm-hmm.
And he carried them until they got their crops in, and the money from the crops the next fall.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mr. Russo, the Russo building. He says if it hadn't been for your dad, he says my folks would have starved the first year they got here. But he trusted them for groceries. And that's because he'd been an immigrant boy and poor at the time when he came over, so he appreciated what had been done for him, and he wanted to do the same for the other people.
Do you know when he emigrated to the United States?
Sure. He was 19 when he got here, and he was born 1 year after the Civil War in 1866.
Mm-hmm. Why
So
Fredonia?
he was 19. Well, because he was on his way around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he stopped to visit with some cousins by the name of West in Dunkirk.
Mm-hmm.
And the West and the Hubbards. In fact, Jim Hubbard was his uncle. And I think he kind of fell in love maybe with a French-Irish lady, which is my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
So he decided to stay in Fredonia.
Mm-hmm.
They went in the grocery business.
Was that their family background was groceries?
Well, he'd been a grocer's apprentice in England.
Mm-hmm.
So he was familiar with the grocery business.
Mm-hmm.
And he went in with a fellow by the name of Mr. Knight in Fredonia, and then a couple of years later he bought his own store.
Mm-hmm.
He had a store in Leona too, at the end of Route 83, next to the tannery.
So he was the first to have more than one market, huh?
Well, sorta. He had a store in Fredonia here.
So he is here, and he's really the guy raising you with your grandmother.
Yeah.
Where did you live?
64 West Main Street. I was born in the room that later became Joe DiMaggio's barbershop.
Okay, explain that.
Well, Joe, he sold a house on Main Street when I was about 12 years old, but I was born in that house, and Mr. DiMaggio bought it because he was going to buy it and sell it back to a gas station and put a service station in there. And Mr. DiMaggio never got the service station, but he had his barber shop in one room, and the barber shop was in the room that I was born in.
I'll be darned.
Next door to Bimber's Saloon. Bimber's Saloon was on the corner of Cataway Street and Fredonia and Main Street, and so I was born next door to the saloon, in a house which later became a saloon.
There you go. What prompted Arthur Maytum to start a telephone company?
Oh, that's been well documented, but my understanding of it is, and there are probably other people tell you a different story, but he and Mr. Colburn that ran the mill down on the corner of Norton and Water Street, and the United Canning Company, which was on Eagle Street, and the DAV Railroad had a four-line or a four-telephone system that was put up by some science teacher in the college and an apt student, and they put it up, and Pa had it put up so that he could contact the railroad station to find out when the trains were coming in so he could ship his produce south, because he shipped a lot of basket grapes and things like that south, and he could find out when the train was coming in so he could get his produce, because there was a railroad running right through Fredonia.
Right.
From Dunkirk to, well, at that time went from Dunkirk to Oil City down that far. It wasn't the Oil City, Titty down in there someplace it terminated.
Right.
You know, they were going on to Pittsburgh. It was actually it was the Dunkirk Allegheny Valley in Pittsburgh, but they only got as far as Titusville.
Right.
That was the terminus, the southern terminus.
So his principal purpose for establishing such a...
His own personal communications.
Right. Who would he be communicating to?
U.S. Canning Company, the railroad company, and the Colburn's Mill on Norton Place.
So did other merchants see how he was using this and then...
I don't think that actually happened. I think what actually happened was the Bell patents ran out in about 1895 or 6. There were 16-year patents, and the phone was invented in 1876. So how many does that make it? 16 would be 92. The Bell patents ran out. So when the Bell patents ran out, well, then a lot of these little independents started up in competition with the Bell systems because they found a way to make money. And especially the politicians like Sam Nixon's father, S. Fred Nixon, who was Speaker of the Assembly in New York at the age of 29 years old. He and a group of men around decided that they would get some telephone companies who would start them up, and they'd make a nuisance of themselves so that the Bell would buy them out and they'd make some money. Well, they turned out to be so successful that they hung on to them instead of selling them out.
Now, that would be John Wright down in the Jamestown Telephone Company?
No, John Wright came from Fredonia, Pennsylvania. He came up from Fredonia, Pennsylvania, and I don't know how he got into Jamestown. I'm not quite familiar with that. But he got Jamestown. He later ran Widgeway, Pennsylvania, and he ran Meadville, Pennsylvania. He acquired a lot of those companies, but John wasn't in this original Chautauqua County bunch.
Okay.
It was Sam Nixon, Fred Crandall, or not Fred Crandall, Sam Crandall, and Moorhead was a banker in northeast Pennsylvania, and Fred Plato was an attorney in Buffalo, Ellicott Square. He had his offices in the Ellicott Square business, and Frost was in the gas company here. Those guys all kind of got together and started up. And they hired a fellow by the name of Clothier to run it. Well, Mr. Clothier didn't pay attention to business, so about 6 months after he took over the job to begin with, Mr. Clothier then was released by the other people. They were looking for somebody, so they figured that A.R. Maytum would be a pretty good guy to run the telephone business. So he ran the telephone business and the grocery store until 1906, when he got out of the grocery business and stayed with the telephone business.
What was the name of the telephone company at the time?
Dunkirk and Fredonia Telephone Company, because originally they expected to go into Dunkirk and be a nuisance to the Bell system, a competitor. But it didn't work out that way. We bought the Bell out in Fredonia, and the New York Telephone Company continued to operate alone in Dunkirk.
Right. So this would have been 1906 when he actually devotes his full time.
I became full-time.
Did he buy it at the time? Do you remember? It was just
He didn't buy it. He worked for guys. He had a little bit of stock in it. He didn't have anything when he came to this country, not a cent.
Right.
He was broke.
And that was the beginning of the Maytum dynasty at Dunkirk and Fredonia Telephone.
Well, I don't know. It switched back. This is not for public consumption, I hope.
No, this is your private stock.
He actually, well, Mr. Plato and Sam Nixon and my dad became the principal stockholders. They each owned about, well, Mr. Plato owned a little over 1/3 of the stock, and Pa owned about another third. Sam eventually wound up with almost a third. And that was the way he got into the dynasty. I mean, he didn't own control of the company until 1953, when he bought Mr. Plato's stock, because some of the other people that were trying to buy it were too cheap to give Mr. Plato what it was worth. Pa gave him what it was worth, and so Plato's relatives took the offer.
When does Bob Maytum first be introduced to the telephone company business? Obviously, your grandfather is working there.
Oh heck, I was sort of born into it. I worked there Saturdays, and when I was big enough to deliver checks or to help pay a bill, I worked there Saturday mornings and stuff. And actually, what happened was when I went to work for him in the summertime, because like I told you before, I'd gotten kicked out of UCLA, and Bob told me I could learn to. He told me I could learn to work with my back or my mind, but he said in the meantime I could work out on the line for one summer. That was my first permanent assignment, was outside working summers digging post holes. And I decided I didn't want to work all my life with my back, so I decided I'd go back and go to school and try to get through. And then when I got through college, I no longer dug the post holes. I became a lineman.
All right, let's stop for a little about your education. You went to Fredonia Public Schools?
This is why I'm so interested in people wonder why I'm interested in this college over here. I went to kindergarten at the old Fredonia Normal School, which was a training school, when I was 5 years old. So I was associated with that school until the time I graduated from 8th grade, and then went to public high school because the normal school had got rid of their high school. So that's my first part of education, was those years that I spent there. So I am very much interested in the college, because it seems like home to me.
Sure.
Plus the fact that my sister graduated there, and aunt and uncle graduated from there, Julie's graduated from there, and that's why I got interested in it.
So you went to Fredonia Normal, and then you went to, at 9th grade, did you,
At the end of 8th grade, I went up to the high school on the hill,
okay.
which was originally built for junior high school, but when they kicked the high school out of the Fredonia Normal, why they had to have it someplace, so they had it in the building that was supposed to be the junior high school.
And what year did you graduate from Fredonia High School?
1930.
1930.
I got elected class president because I refused to go to the meeting, and I had no way of defending myself, so they put me in for president. Nobody else wanted it, so I went in the back door on that one.
Yeah. And then where?
Then I went to UCLA.
Why UCLA? That's California.
Because my
God.
birth mother was a resident of the state of California.
Okay, okay.
And I could get into UCLA tuition free because she was a resident of the state of California. So we were going to, it didn't work out because California in those days was like the next place like heaven on earth, and it was much more fun to sit on the steps of Royce Hall, look at the Pacific Ocean, than it was to go to the library and study.
So how long were you at UCLA?
One semester.
One semester.
And I don't mind telling you, I passed 2 subjects.
Mm-hmm.
I got a D in physics and a D in some writing course, an F in 2 other courses, and I got a B and a C.
There you go.
And the C was in physical education, and the B was in military science and tactics in ROTC.
Right.
So that's my first year college record. And they advised me to stay out, and of course I was a smart aleck kid, and I said, there's no way you're kicking me out of this school. I'm going to stay here. Would you change your major? I will not change my major until heck freeze is over. But it didn't work that way. They said, we think we better sit out and wait another half year before you come back. Then maybe you'll decide to change your major. I was going to be an engineer.
Right.
Unfortunately, I failed badly in science and in mathematics.
Did you stay out in California once you...
Yeah, I stayed there, tried to get a job during the Depression. I stood in line with 200 other people to get a $15 a week job. And I got a $15, and I went with a girl out there, and her father must have liked me or something, because he got me a job with a Howard Automobile Company that sold Buicks. But I went down to get the interview for the job, and I didn't have it yet, but he told me to go down there and they'd probably give it to me. I went down there, and the fellow found out I was going back to school, and he said, no, we don't want to break you in and train you for this job and then have you just leave us, go back to college again.
Right.
So I didn't get that job, but that would have paid $15 a week too. So that's how much you could, if you could find a job, that's what they were paying.
Did you work at any other places out there in California?
Yep, I worked at a gas station where they sold gasoline for, well, they had a gas war going on, they sold 12 gallons for $1. And usually it was 8 gallons for $1. And I think I worked for this guy, Al Nordstrom, his name was. He had a service station on the corner of Los Feliz and Glendale Boulevard, I think. And he hired me to work there because he wanted to go someplace one day. The only work I didn't sell any gasoline, but I raked the yard pretty good because they had pebbles for the driveways in those days. They didn't have blacktop. And I got a free tank of gas. That's what I got paid. So that was not a very successful job.
Then, at this time, were you living with your natural mother then at the time?
Yeah, my mother and stepfather. I lived with them.
Right. Now, did you stay in contact with them while you were living here in Fredonia? I mean, did you have...
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
In fact, my mother would probably have taken me back to California, but my grandmother wasn't going to see me get knocked around, so she says, I'll take him until you get straightened out.
Right.
That's the way it wound up.
Yeah. When did you come back here?
Oh, after I got kicked out of school. I couldn't get a job out there. Pa says, you come back here and I'll find work for you. And he did. Put me in the line crew.
And that would have been about when, timing-wise?
1931.
31?
And the 31 of fall, the fall of 31 is when I went to Allegheny.
Okay. Why Allegheny, of all places?
Because that was about the only school that would take me in. I wrote applications around to different other schools, but they weren't interested in an old beat-up wreck that couldn't study. So, and Mr. Ross, Clarence Frisbee Ross, was the registrar then, and Mrs. Grace Saxton, who was been my high school advisor, went down to Allegheny because she knew Dr. Ross. So she went in and pleaded my case with Dr. Ross. He says, well, I think we can find room for you.
I'll be darned. And while there, you joined a prestigious fraternity?
Yes. Same one you belong to.
Which is?
Fiddly Fate. Phi Delta Theta.
There we go. Thank you. No, this one. Okay. So they don't know. The people who are watching this, they have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, that's all right. I'm not sure I do.
Do you want coffee?
No thanks.
Sure.
I did all my drinking with you guys at lunch.
By the way, the house, where was it? Was it on Harris? They're down on Terrace? You were at the Heidi Cooper Mansion?
Yeah, on the terrace.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where the house when I joined was up on Park Avenue.
Oh, was it?
That was a beat-up one where we used to have the water fights and have the water about 3 inches deep on the floor. And everybody'd get in a fight, and then we'd go to the football trainer, who was a fight-out, and he'd patch us up. Take care of all the scratches and cuts and bruises.
Remember, just for the crowd here, earlier today he was complaining about the hazing of the current guys, you know?
Oh, they didn't haze me. I thought they would have hazed me. All they did was the big guys that were 6 foot tall and 200 pounds wanted a boxing lesson. And they pretty near killed me.
Well, but let's talk about your boxing career.
No, we don't want to talk about that.
You had a nickname, and what was that?
Well, that was Slug.
Slug. Slug Maytum. Why were you a Slug Maytum?
Well, because I had a tendency to have a quick temper, and plus the fact that I learned from my stepfather how to box.
Mm-hmm. And
he was an amateur fighter.
Mm-hmm.
In those days they had amateurs. They got paid, but they were club fighters, and they went around and got a little money for putting on an exhibition at gentlemen's clubs.
I'm sorry.
And he taught me how.
And he was living in California,
Yeah.
right? What was his name?
Jim Hunter.
Jim Hunter?
Yeah, my mother's name was Adele Hunter.
Okay. I know I've seen a couple of certificates, one in my autograph collection, of club fights out in California, and the winner of these club fights would be signed by James J. Jeffries, who was the former
Heavyweight champion, sure.
but it was a California club, and that's
Yeah, they probably fought at the Olympic Auditorium.
right. Yep, exactly. Good memory.
Oh, I used to go there. I watched Joan Blondell introduce the fighters out there. Joan Blondell was a movie star in those days.
Right.
And they had her out there to introduce some of the fighters.
Did you have a role model when you were growing up?
No, I guess I just grew up. I don't know. Sure, there probably certain people came along. I can't think of any right now. Pa was awful good to me. He was a strict, stern taskmaster, but he taught me the ropes.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say Pa, that's
A.R. Maytum.
okay.
It's my grandfather.
Right.
And legally adopted,
Right.
by the way.
Okay.
John Patterson was the judge.
Okay.
Ever seen his papers?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
John K. Patterson. He was one of Pa's poker playing friends.
Oh, was that right?
Pa was the best poker player in the country.
Mm-hmm. Where did he learn that?
I don't know. He didn't learn it from me, and he didn't teach it to me.
But I understand you were involved in an incident concerning
Yeah, but
illegal activities.
No, I never was a gambler. I'd rather spend my money and throw it away. But that was a crap game. That was a well, it's documented in a paper if I ever find a paper.
Well, tell me a little bit about it in case we don't find the paper.
Well, it's just a juvenile trick played by older fellas that got the police to intercept not intercept, but interfere.
Well, set the scene, Bob. You kids are doing some stuff, right?
Well, what happened? Now, if you really want to know the story,
I do.
this is going to take up your whole interview.
I got time. I got an extra tape too.
Yeah, but I don't got time. I gotta go take my nap. Anyway, the crap game started out. We used to have a bridge club. The fellas had it, and then the women horned in on it, and they called it just a charade group. So we had a picnic on the 4th of July, and the picnic was down at Herb Mackey's house, and Herb Mackey at that time was dean of men at the college. And so the women were all in the house doing something, and the men were out in the garage chewing a fat, and including Gene Lawson and Bill Lawson's father, who was Sergeant Murphy of the Buffalo Police Department. He was on the scene too. And so we went out in the garage, and we were just standing around, and somebody says, "Hey, we ought to have a crap game." No, I said, well, nobody's got the dice. So Hugo Wolf says, "I got some dice over at the house." So he went over across the street and he got some dice. So the guys all got down their hands and knees on the floor with about 6 or 7 cents, and this is true, just a few pennies. Everybody threw in a penny in the middle of the floor. And they started a little crap game with all this baby needs new shoes and all this stuff. and anyway, so I said Bill Moore was there too. He was the high school coach at the time. And I said to Denny, I said, hey Denny, you keep the game going and I'll go downtown and I'll get Irv Kroenke and he'll come up and he'll pull a false arrest on these guys and we'll just have a little fun. So Denny says, you go ahead, and he says, I'll keep things going. So he kept the stuff going, and I went out to the police station, and Kroenke happened to be there. And that was the days when the Fredonia police rode a motorcycle instead of riding a car. And old Kroenke says, sure, he says, I'll be glad to help you out. He says, that'll be fun. So he rides his motorcycle up to the corner of Curtis Place, Lambert Avenue, turns the motorcycle off, and then it close down the hill on Curtis Place until it stops in front of Herb Mackey's barn. He goes in and he stands with his arm up against the door frame, watching the game going on. And all of a sudden, Hugo Wolf looks up and he says, holy smokes, the cops. And the dice and the pennies and everything else disappeared real quick. And they said, well, Irv, we were just having a little fun there. And Irv says, are you sure? He says, I just wanted to come down to warn you that I've had a complaint in the neighborhood and that you fellas had better be careful about this game that's going on here. So with that, he turns around and walks away. Well, Jim Arms, who was a great jokester and also my second wife's first husband, Jim Arms says, at the Manly session says, hey, we ought to do something about this, hadn't we? Manly was the editor of the paper and owner of the paper, and Manly says, yeah, we could print a special edition of the Fredonia Censor, and we could outline this, and it would be just the issue that went to the people that were in the crap game. They printed 25 extra copies is actually what they did. They put one in Pratt's Barbershop and one in the library and the other public place that would normally get a newspaper. And so they got the collection together. They raised about $100 to print this special edition of which Pa was a contributor. And they put a list of names of all the guys in that were in the crap game. And that went to all the houses that had the fellas that were playing in a game. But the regular edition didn't cause any consternation because that was just regular, went to the regular subscribers. Well, that shook up a lot of the guys because they all thought that was a real paper. When it came to their house, they thought, oh my Lord, look at what the censor's done to us. And one guy says, I think we better go over to the telephone company. He says, I'm going over and punch Bob Maytum in the nose. And I didn't get the paper out. I just got the cops to stop the game. And so it gradually died down, but not before my dad asked Hugo Wolf. He told me he ought to resign from the church vestry for being caught gambling in public. And they told Herb Mackey he wasn't doing the college any good because he shouldn't be letting crap games go on in his barn. And Diddy Moore, he shouldn't be teaching the high school kids because he was a bad character for being in a crap game. And what was Bill Lawson? I don't know. Anyway, they had all kinds of names for him, like Arwood Quist. He worked for the power company, and he was in it. And they called him Arwood I Pass Quist. And I was Slug Maytum, and Bill Lawson was kind of a slow-acting fella, and so Jack Fish, who was an engineer for the state, when they built the music building, had dubbed him with the name of Torpid. So they had William Torpid Lawson, manager of Van Walt, and they had all these kind of things in there. What they called Diddy Moore? Oh, they can't be. It was something uncomplimentary. It always uncomplimentary names. And then it just sort of died down after that. Everybody had a good laugh, and that was it. I have 2 copies of that paper someplace. I hope I can find it. I want to take one to the college library so that they can see what their faculty used to do.
And what one of their principal benefactors used to do. Part of Fredonia is there's a Maytum Hall.
Yeah.
There.
The tallest building in Chautauqua County by 3 feet.
There you go. How did that come to be?
Well, that came to me because I guess Dr. Lanford thought that my dad had done enough for the college, so they ought to name a building after him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was unique about what your pa did?
He was chairman of the board of visitors for years and years.
Mhm.
Everybody tried to get it away from him, but of course he liked it and he wouldn't resign because he went as far as the 6th grade in school, so to be standing up there and handing out diplomas to college kids was pretty good for him.
How was his connection then with the college? I mean, somebody had to
Chairman of the board of visitors.
so somebody got a hold of him, and he, obviously being a businessman here.
Well, he was friends with Les Gregory and Herman Cooper,
Mhm.
and I know he was on this, had to do with the selection of Harry Porter, and you know, they recommended just like they do today, like the council does.
Right.
They were just like the college council, so if you know what they do, that's what they did. And my dad was regional too, because he at one time, well, there was he, Harry Cummings, Dr. Wheelock Sr., and a couple other people from Fredonia were on, but there was nobody outside. So they got together and they got Cy Huff. Oh, Sam Nixon from Westville was on.
Mhm.
Sam Nixon Jr., not the speaker, but the other one. So they got together and they got Cy Huff from Jamestown on first. And then they began to try to pick up people here and there that from other areas in the county, so to make it more regional.
Mhm.
I can't remember the names of the other guys, but that's what he was on, and that's his connection with the college, and he used to enjoy standing up there and giving out the diplomas every graduation, because they let him sit on a platform and hand them out.
Well, was he involved at all in the siting of the new buildings and stuff like that? Do you recall?
Oh yeah.
I mean, such an.
Oh sure. He was the local man, and he could go around and talk to people like Mr. Hart on Will Hart on Temple Street, Washburn's, Mrs. Love, and those people up and down Temple Street that the college was trying to buy the property in back there for expansion. And those people, you know, would trust him. And if he'd recommend it, why, it was a lot easier for them to say, yeah, they'd sell their back lots to the state of New York. And he didn't drive a car, and I remember I used to drive him around some, and I remember going to these people and sitting in the kitchen talking about selling their property. There was a guy that ran the little store stand on the corner. What was his name? It wasn't Mahalski, it was something like that. On the corner there was a little grocery store on Temple Street. Then became to Washburn's where they pressed apples. And then Will Hart had a place, Mrs. Love had a big place. And those people all agreed to sell. So once you got the ball rolling, why, that's it. So he really had a big part in buying that land. Plus the fact that Les Gregory, who was then the principal of the college, or principal of the school, and he was chairman of the County Republican Party. Dan Scannell was from Dunkirk, and he was chairman of the Democratic Party. And so they could go down to Pa knew the Nixon family, so they could, and Joe McGinnis. And so they could go down to Albany and talk to these people pretty good. And they had it covered from all sides, so to speak.
Right.
They had all the bases covered. So they had a lot to do with getting the first music building on this campus, because if the music building hadn't gone here, the college had a pretty good chance of going to Jamestown, with all due respects.
Yeah, well,
So
we missed it. So.
that's why the college is in Fredonia, if you want to know the truth. It's because they got the music building up, and then it was easier.
Oh, absolutely. Was your dad also involved with the fairgrounds?
Yep. He was secretary of the fair for years. And what he decided, he got sick in 1930 and he was going to quit. And Robert Gross, who had been the chief operating officer, or whatever you call him in those days, in the locomotives company, was also interested in the fair. He was president of the fair board. Pa had been secretary for several years. He said, I don't think I want to stay on anymore. And Mr. Gross says, he says, you stay on. He says, you name your salary. He says, you can have whatever it takes to keep you here. And of course, as with the school board of visitors and with the fair, Pa was very much interested in, and it was a county fair. It was not a Dunkirk fair. It was a county fair. Mm-hmm. And of course, the board of supervisors had always reluctantly given any money at all to the college or to the fairgrounds because they didn't think they ought to be supporting the Dunkirk Fair. Pa went over and told them that that wasn't the Dunkirk Fair. It was the Chautauqua County Fair. It was for everybody in the county, and therefore the Board of Supervisors finally appropriated $25,000 to the fairgrounds. He was on when they built new floral hall, when they built a new concrete grandstand, things like that. But of course, that stuff's gone now. No, he was very interested in the fair. Well, in fact, when I went to college, when I went to Allegheny College, he worked 3 jobs, actually. He was supervisor of the town of Pomfret, he was secretary of the fair, and he was manager of the telephone company at a total salary of the 3 places of about $8,000.
I'll be there. What was his politics?
Well, he was a Democrat when he first came here from England, and so he was talking to Sam Nixon's father, which was S. Fred Nixon I, the Speaker of the Assembly, and Mr. Nixon says, no, Arthur, he says, Pa says, I'm going to change to be a Republican, Fred. And Fred says to him, no, he says, I don't think you should. He says, you can do me a lot more good if you stay Democrat for a while. So Pa stayed Democrat and worked on the other side for Mr. Nixon. And then he changed to Republican. Because, you know, in the early days, all you had to do was be the Republican nominee and you could be elected.
Right.
Not so anymore.
What do you think of Franklin Roosevelt?
It's not printable. It's not for public consumption, but actually, when Franklin Roosevelt went through Dunkirk on the back end of a train on an observation car, we went down to hear him. Pa was a great one to go hear all the public figures. So we went down, and he says, you know, we came away, and he says, you know, he says, I could almost be converted by that guy. Because he stood on the back of the observation car. I can still remember him to this day. And he motioned all the people to come closer like this, and he's going to give them a fireside chat right off the back end of the observation platform. And Pa says, you know, he could almost convince me, but he didn't.
Now, one of the things we just kind of blew right over, we talked about your name being in a paper slug. You also told the story earlier, you might as well repeat about how you hit somebody, right? I mean, I don't like to hit people. I don't think I should get into that, except when a guy bumps you in the nose, you have a tendency to retaliate. Okay.
So I swung, and the referee saw me. And put me out of the game.
Yeah.
And it was only a second team, I'll tell you, because as far as an athlete's concerned, I have probably the #1 bench warmer that Fredonia High School ever had. I was the best bench warmer they ever had. But I had the fun of trying.
Yep.
It's like going to school. When I went back to high school, I was not a very good student. And Miss Dye, the math teacher, God bless her soul, she told me, she says, you know, Robert, she says, when you were in school, she says, you weren't the smartest student in Fredonia High or the smartest student that they ever had, but she says, you probably had more fun than anybody else in high school. They were a great bunch of teachers. Cora Sandy Baldwin was the biology teacher. I still remember what she taught me.
But you had to come back here at some point, I mean, from California, and you drove in a Model A?
Model A 1929, Model A4, late Model 29, because the early models had the brake in front of the gear shift, but the late Model 29s had the brake off to the side of the gear shift.
Right.
Yeah, I jarred the radiator hose connection loose coming across US 80 in the state of Texas because it was a washboard gravel road for about 50 miles. And I jarred the radiator loose, so I came across before the road was paved all the way.
It's like that movie they had on PBS the other day. The first guy that went across continent was a guy named Jackson, Dr. Jackson. Pretty interesting. So you've always had an interest in cars.
Yep.
Tell me about that. Why?
Well, I don't know. It's just I like cars. I must like the sense of motion. I was always drawing pictures of racers when I was a kid. I like racers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to race somebody on the road, but the track's a different thing.
Right, right. Did you go to races?
Oh yeah, I've been to the Indianapolis Speedway race 3 times.
Okay. Did you, is that something you would have liked to have done? I mean, aside
No.
from being a lineman.
I was too chicken. I was too chicken to driving cars. I wouldn't want to smash the car up.
Could I ask you to tell about the artwork on your wall in the office with your cars? You had 3 cars.
Oh, do you mean about the picture of the Colonial Inn?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing because there are so many copies of that around town, and most of the people who possess those copies don't know the story behind it.
Well, the copy of the whole thing was that they got Larry Herbshardt to picture the things that had been interesting in my life. One was the Barker Library, because, you know, I was interested in that. Trinity Church, which they faced towards Main Street, and the Colonial Inn, where I courted Virginia, the love of my life, and where and it showed a picture of my car, the old Ford Model T, stopped there, and Grandpa Whipple's Buick, and I don't know who the other one is. I'd have to look again. That was Grandpa Whipple's old Buick, 32. Buick Roadmaster.
You mentioned Virginia. Tell us about how you met Virginia.
I don't think you want to know
Oh,
that.
yes, I do. A little bit about the courtship.
This only goes to the kids?
Just the kids.
Okay, well, I was in Ellsworth's jewelry store where my best friend worked on Main Street, and all of a sudden a good-looking girl walked by, and I mean, she was good-looking. And she went down the street, and my best friend says to me, he says, there goes a new girl in town. Her folks just took over the Colonial Inn, and they just moved in, and she came with them. And I says, oh? So I rushed to the door to look out and see, and boy, when I looked down the street, she looked pretty good. I says to myself, boy, there's the girl for me right there. So I finally married her. But there
How
was
did you meet her? You saw her. Now, there's got to be more of a game.
I can tell you that story too. That story was it came New Year's Eve in 1931, and Harry Barlow, who was my good friend in the jewelry store, said, let's go to the dance over at the White Inn. He says, I'll ask the girl across the street. He says, you find some girl, and we'll go to the dance together up at the White Inn, the New Year's dance. You know, he got all dressed up and gussied up, and oh boy, that was quite a time. Anyhow, I said, fine. So I asked Jane Lovely, who was a girl that I'd been to high school with, and she said, yeah, she'd go. So we went to the dance, and we had a darn nice time. After the dance, we went down to Jane Lovely's house for coffee and stuff like that. You know, those were the days of Prohibition. Wasn't boozing very much. And
Yeah, just so you know, days of Prohibition, you didn't booze very much.
well, I didn't booze any, but if you booze it, you had to get it illegal. But anyway, we went down to Jane Lovely's, we sit around talking, and I got pretty interested in Virginia. This is the new girl, Virginia Whipple. So the next day I called her up. And I didn't bother to ask my friend whether he was still interested in her or not. I
Like somebody else.
was called up, and I got a date. And she had told her mother that no matter what happens, if that boy calls up, she says, you get me. She went down to Genevieve Ross's to spend the afternoon with Genevieve. She was a friend of Genevieve's, you know, Bob Ross. And so she went down there, and her mother told her when she got home that I'd called up. So I called again. She said she'd go out with me, so that started a whole shoot match. Boy, she was a good-looking girl.
What did she think of you?
I don't know. I know.
Where'd you, after you got married, where'd you get married and where did you first live?
Well, we got married in Trinity Church. It was supposed to be just a service for our family, but it leaked out somehow, and there were people up on the balcony that shouldn't have been there, but you can't throw people out of church. And so we lived at 13 Forest Place.
Right behind what was the old Acme store, right?
Right behind what was the old Acme store. We rented the place for $18 a month.
What was there before Acme was there, do you remember?
Oh gosh, there'd been a lot of things in there. There'd been your relatives, your grandfather, Prushaw, the Irishman, had a carriage works in there at one time, and there'd been a streetcar barns there. There'd been the power plant that blew up, scared everybody in Fredonia. And oh shoot, there'd been a lot of stuff in there. The old gasometer, which was a place where they stored the gas for the Frost Gas Company, a big cylinder, and then they'd store it in there and then let it out as they needed it. That's gone. If you weren't claustrophobic, you could climb down into the old tower, which was a good size one, about 30 or 40 feet across in diameter. But I never went down in it because I was claustrophobic, and besides that, I was chicken.
Well, you after you got married, did you have a honeymoon? Did you go on a honeymoon, or?
Yep, I wanted to go to the Adirondacks or someplace fancy like that, and I got roped into going to East Aurora. At the old Roycroft Inn. And we had said that, let's see, we went down to make arrangements to get the room. And we just put our rings on for fun of it, so that the guys would think we were married. So that when we came in, they wouldn't think we got married. So we made all the arrangements for the room on such and such a time and everything. And so when we got married, they threw ice at the wedding. And Virginia had a little kind of a straw hat with a brim on it. One of these little, you know what I'm talking about. And they'd thrown rice. And we said we'd been in there several days ago, made arrangements for the room, and that we wanted to stay there. So when she tipped over like this, all the rice fell out on the registration book when she stepped over to sign her. And so the guys knew that we were really on our honeymoon. Oh gosh, I'm not going to go into that. That's personal.
What'd you drive there? Because when would you own?
32 V8 Ford Roadster that you had to put the side curtains up on when it rained. That belonged to your Aunt Gertie. Aunt Gertie used to let me drive her car when she wasn't teaching school, but this time she arranged to let me have it early.
When did you buy your first car that you owned?
1948 Ford, 49 Ford. Every time I'd go to buy a car, Pa'd say to me, "I don't drive, use the car I got."
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know how you feel about that after a while.
Why didn't he drive?
Well, that's a long story. That's his personal. He didn't drive because I think driving made him nervous. Mm-hmm. He drove a horse, he hitched a horse up when he was in the grocery business because he delivered groceries sometimes or went out and took orders. But there's one story connected with it. I think I discouraged him from driving. Mm-hmm. We had a Model T, 1921 Model T Ford sedan. One of these kind that the doors had a door on the right-hand side, no door on the left side, and you got in the sedan and you squeezed across and into the driver's seat. And if you had a passenger, you had to put the seat back up, the other seat back up in the front. That was a folding seat. And incidentally, you were sitting on the gas tank when you were driving, which was a very good safety thing. And and also in the back seat, and no rollers on the windows. You had a strap that pulled the windows up and let them down with a strap. Well, anyway, Pa didn't have a license probably to drive in those days either because they weren't so fussy, but I was about probably 10 or 12 years old. And we decided to go down to Dunkirk one day. He decided to drive down to see his cousins in Dunkirk, the West, that lived on Robin Street. So he got in a car and I stood up in the back. Mom and Pa sat in the front and I stood in the back. He didn't know beans about how to work that machine. But I told him about, putting that car had a starter too, because I remember you put your heel on it. The original Model Ts, you had to crank them, but this one had a starter. And so anyway, it had 3 pedals. That's the way you drove. It had a clutch, reverse, and a brake. Half the time the brake didn't work, but it didn't matter because any pedal that you pushed on a Model T, you could stop. Mm-hmm. Because if you pushed the clutch, you stopped right down to low speed, or the reverse, you stopped, and the brake stopped if it worked. So anyway, we started for Dunkirk, and if you didn't get your spark set just right, there was a gas on the right side, and a spark lever on the left side of the steering wheel, just under the steering wheel. And you had to get the spark set just right to make the engine run smooth, and then you could control the speed by the gas lever. Well, of course, if you didn't get the spark just right, it would go down the road. You get out like this, so up, way down. And Pa had trouble with that on Central Avenue. We finally got straight. I said, put the spark up and pull it down, and then let the gas, pull the gas down. And I told him how everything to go through shifting, because unbeknownst to him, I had gone into the telephone barn, which was in back of our house, and when they'd bring the truck in and it was warm, it was a Model T, I could turn the crank on it. So I'd go in when the guys got through with it at 5 o'clock, so I'd start it up and I'd run back and forth in the barn. And that's how I learned to drive a Model T. And anyway, we went to Dunkirk, we did our visiting, and we came back to go in the barn on Candaway Street, which is in back of Pierce Brothers Garage. And he started up the drive up over the curb and into the barn, and he stalled her. So I said, what do I do? He says, what do I do now? I said, start it up again. I said, back up a little bit so you can get a run. And I said, now give her the gas. So he gave her the gas and pushed in the clutch and took off part of the garage door. and then slammed on the brake real fast so he wouldn't go through the other. So that was the experience that scored him on the Model T, and I don't think he ever drove since then. So that was my driving lesson. I gave somebody else a driving lesson. I would have been nervous having a kid standing over my shoulder like that, but he wasn't. He just did what I told him to, but he did it a little too vigorously.
On your timeline, I think we kind of left you down at Allegheny College as a good Phi-Delt. What did you major in at Allegheny?
What did I major in? Mm-hmm. Economics.
Economics?
Economics and a minored in English.
Mm-hmm. And it was a 4-year college then, right?
I got through 3 years.
Okay.
By going to school for three years and 2 summer schools. I went to UB 1 summer and Allegheny 1 summer. I got 20 hours credit in summer schools.
Then you came back here?
Yep.
What did your dad have you do when you came back here?
I was a lineman.
Lineman.
Fixed telephones, repaired telephones, did anything anybody else wouldn't do. Because I was told to do them.
Describe a telephone in 1930-31. What was it? What did it look like?
Well, of course, the majority of them was the desk types, which are common if you watch old movies. Mm-hmm. And they weren't dials. They just take the receiver off and just had a central battery. The operator would answer your call, then you'd tell her the number you wanted. She'd complete the call and start plug into the other line and start the right ring. Mm-hmm.
So we just took a couple of those out of our office a few years ago.
No, those that came out of your office were something. It was a different scheme. We bought those from Stromberg Carlson or something. You remember?
I do.
They were
Very kind of you to set up our intercom.
I tried for years to get you to get a better system, but you liked what you had. And I don't blame you.
Oh, yeah, it was a good system.
You have them in your museum now.
Are they?
Yes.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
So you're there as a lineman. What's the next progression for Bob Maytum in the Dunkirk and Fredonia Telephone Company?
Well, it's obvious that I'm not going to learn how to run the business working on a line, so we had really what set it off was we didn't have much of a bookkeeping system. And we hired an accountant in Syracuse who had done work for telephone companies by the name of John Larkin and Company. They came in and set up books for our company, and they made a complete inventory of our plant and a complete system for charging what you put in the plant, what you took out of the plant, and also the revenue accounting and so forth. And that's when I got mixed up in it, because I got into the plant accounting business. I started working first on the inventory outside, because we'd never had a complete plant inventory. We just sort of worked on the public service reports from year to year and added and took out what Pa knew.
Right.
Not what was factual, but what he could remember.
Mm-hmm.
So that
At
was
what
it.
point, as your grandfather, known as Pa, He's running the business.
Yeah, I knew Pa from the beginning, right from the first. I was the first and only father I ever had.
So Pa's there, and you're still, but there's an age gap. And as in most age gaps, when you get into the business, sometimes you don't always easily buy into what Pa's doing.
I got an answer to that. Now, when I couldn't find a job, I was going to go to work for the New York Telephone Company. And I went to see him in Easter time in 1934. They said, sure, when you graduate in August, you come back. So I went back. It was the heart of the Depression. It hadn't even started to climb out yet. They said, we're sorry, we have to back up. We can't give you a job that we promised you. And the guy that was the one for it was Ben Cravens, who later became the manager in Jamestown, because he was a vice president for New York Tel when John Wright hired him away. Well, anyway, let's see, where was I at? He was going to, what did you ask me?
I'm going to ask you, at what point did you say, I'm in this business?
All right. So, I was in the business because there was no other place to go, the Depression. Pa says, they didn't give you the job they promised you. That's not right. But he says, I'll take you on. Now he says, your mother and Gertrude and Aunt Hilda, which were his 3 own children, says, you and I won't get along, because they never got along real good with him except Gertrude. But he says, I say we will. So if you want to go to work for me, I'd like to have you. So I said, well, I'm certainly perfectly willing to take it on that basis, because I knew darn well I could get along with him. So in spite of any admonitions from any other people, I went to work for Pa. And he was right. He didn't always agree with me, and if I wanted to do something, he'd say, oh, I don't think we can do that. He'd think about it, and 2 or 3 days later he'd call me and he'd say, you know, I've been thinking about what you said. And he says, maybe you got an idea there. He says, maybe we could try it. But that's the relationship that he and I always had. He was the boss, and I knew it, but he was a good boss, and he never asked me to do anything that he wouldn't do himself.
Gee, it sounds kind of familiar, you know?
What?
The fact that every once in a while you can come up with a good idea, and 2 or 3 days later your father call you in and say, well, maybe I'm thinking about that. Maybe you got an idea there. This sounds familiar.
Did you have that happen to you?
Yeah, I have had it happen a couple of times.
Well, then he came naturally by it. I didn't think you guys had that problem. No, he was a good boss. He was a fair man. When he was secretary of the fair, the guys would say, hey, we don't have to have a contract with Mr. Maytum. His word's as good as anything. If he shakes your hand, that's as good as a signature on a piece of paper. That's what he taught me. And yet I've heard him sit there and say to customers, he'd say, well, now, if you don't like your telephone service and it's not doing what you think it ought to do, you could take the telephone out. I'd say to him afterwards, you can't say that to people. You have to, we're the only people that furnish telephone service, so we got to try to do it. He says, you handle it. He says, you're better at handling people than I am. That was as good a compliment as he could to pay me. And when we wanted to, Mr. Plato was a hard-nosed old attorney in Buffalo, but he was so tight that he squeezed a nickel till the buffalo hollered. And anyway, Mr. Plato, we tried to talk to him about converting the dial system from the old automatic, and he was in the back office. We talked for about an hour. Finally, Pop threw up his hands in disgust. He says, I'm sorry. He says, I got to leave. I'm not going to sit here through this. But I stayed for an hour or an hour and a half later and convinced Mr. Plato that it was feasible to go to dial. Now, I'm not blowing my horn, but I'm just telling you, it's what happened. And Mr. Plato says, well, he says, maybe you're right, we ought to try it. Well, now, since he was a third older in the company, it was very important to have his consent. Pa was willing to ditch it, but not me. Right. And the old man agreed, and eventually, through his relatives and through that connection, we were able to even purchase his stock, which we never would have been otherwise. Boy, he was hard-nosed. He was worse than Charlie when he got into an argument with him. Charlie says to me one time, he says, how come is this, when you and I get into talking about something, we all usually get into an argument? I said, well, I don't know. Why is it? He says, because neither one of us is mealy-mouthed. And Charlie probably don't remember that, but that's what he told me one time. when they were trying to get Concord Drive paved, and I was on the town board. I says, we can't pave every one of those roads. I says, it'll be paved in time. He says, you can pave it now. And I said, we can't pave it now. It's not in the budget.
Decisions, every one of them was perfect. Going, you know, when you redid the plant, when you went to automatic dialing, when you bought Casadega, when you refinanced the company, when you bought a new switch, every one of your strategic decisions was perfect. And you were doing this and taking care of Fredonia and your family all at the same time.
That's very kind of you to say. But you know, I had a lot of help on running the company. The first place, Virginia was a real smart businesswoman, and she had good advice. In the second place, I believe that, and this comes from an organization I belong to, before entering upon or undertaking any important endeavor, we ought always first to invoke the aid of deity. That helps. So I've been lucky.
You always took care of your customers. They had better care than any telephone company in Western New York, as far as I could see. You always took care of your employees. You took care of your shareholders. You managed a balancing act that few people who run companies like yours ever manage.
Well, that's most kind of you to say, but I say that I've been lucky and the Lord's been on my side, and I had a good helping partner, one of the best you could find. And of course, if you have no customers, you have no business. And if you were like me with the early days when, the wartime, when we had an 800 name waiting list, and people that you'd cross over the other side of the street so you wouldn't have to take the flak, then you realize that it's a big challenge to come up with a satisfied group of customers. And of course, as far as service is concerned, some guy tells you that what he's doing over here and he gets commended for this. It's a competitive thing. You want to be the best telephone man in the world.
And you were.
Yeah, well, thanks.
And
but I don't know.
the PSC reports backed you up.
Well, you try hard because, and you know, it isn't all about money, because if you give customer satisfaction and everything, the money's going to come. They're willing to pay for good service. Bad service, no, and you don't blame them. And I can't say anything else to that, but it's just a challenge to do well and to have satisfied customers. And, well, one time I ran for political office. I was in the caucus. I was going to be on the school board. And my dad had trouble with a guy by the name of N.P. Taft. You probably remember him, maybe. Anyway, and over the fact that he had made him pay a discount because he let his bill run over the discount period. And Mr. Taft, he had a real feud going. You wouldn't believe it. And Mr. Taft was a ardent taxpayer party member. And that's the one I was trying to get the nomination in. He says, in the meeting, he told everybody in the meeting, he says, there's no use in you trying to run for public office. He says, the service in this telephone service in this community is so damn rotten that they wouldn't vote for you to be dog catcher. And I stood up in a meeting and I said, now, Mr. Taft, you don't have anything against me. I said, that's because you and my dad don't get along. And I said, if I'm elected on the town board, I'll do the best I can. And I says, besides that, I don't think the service is as bad as you make out. That's the kind of thing you ran into. I had another guy tell me one time when I was a collector, I used to be collecting for the telephone company. I walked into a diner downtown. The guy that owned the diner said to me, he says, why don't you take that telephone out? He says, if you don't, he says, I'm going to take the telephone out and throw you and the telephone in the road. I says, okay, Mr. Stanton. I says, I heard what you said, and so did everybody in the diner. I said, anytime you're ready to start, you try. That ended it. I says, I'm right here. Those are the kind of things that I went through when people would fight with you. You guys think, well, it was all beer and Skittles. It wasn't.
Oh, no. I know exactly.
I've been thrown off of people's property. Oh, Mr. Aldrich out in Sheridan, he's gone, long gone. Threw me off his property because I came out to collect the bill. He says, the reason I ran up such a big bill is, he says, because your father told me when I went in to have my telephone canceled, he says, well now, Ed, you've had this telephone for years. He says, you owe this much now, so he says, why don't you just continue on until you can pay it off? And he says, I couldn't pay it off, and it got up high, and now you're out after your money. I said, well, he did that because he liked people and was trying to help them out. That didn't make any difference. Rouse Smith. And he was a big guy, so I rouse smitted. Now those are the kind of things that you had, and they became challenges. They became things that I tried hard to overcome. You say it ran well. I'm glad it did, because those are the things that you wanted to do. And we would have been converted to dial operation probably in the early 40s if it hadn't been for World War II. World War II, our telephone service did stink, but you couldn't buy supplies, you couldn't get new switchboards, you couldn't get anything. I remember another time going down to, Jack Schiffman called me up. And Jack Schiffman and Chet Van Scoter and Mr. Ostrander, George Ostrander, ran the Good Seed Company. Those guys tore me apart for a couple of hours. They said, you know, we always send oranges to your operators at Christmas time when we go to Florida, but we're not going to send them anymore because the service is so bad. I said, we can't help it. I said, all of it isn't our fault, but I said, we can't put a new switchboard in till the war's over because we're limited on what we can use. They said, well, that doesn't make a difference, the service is awful bad. But it took 3 of them to beat me, or try to beat me. And that are the kind of things that sort of pushes you along. Plus, I say you've had the grace of God back of you and a wonderful, fine woman. And that's what makes it worthwhile.
A beautiful lady.
Hmm?
A very beautiful lady. It was
And a real lady.
Yes, our privilege to
Yeah.
be your neighbors.
You know, well, she was one of a kind. They threw away the pattern when they made her. She was a wonder. You know that.
Everybody agreed with you on that.
Yeah, I never had an argument. I never had anybody say we don't like Virginia because she's this or that. She's that. She was good and kind to everybody.
She was.
Yeah, and when you got those kind of things going for you, you're going to try harder. I just quoted you from Masonic lore.
Mm-hmm.
Grandpa, you had said a little bit about your political history. Pa was also into politics too. As a matter of fact, he was back before they called it mayor. Wasn't he president of the village?
He was president of the village for 2 different terms.
Yeah, and in 1901, he helped to reorganize
The Fredonia Fire Department.
The Fredonia Fire Department after they.
Because they went from they went from a volunteer to a paid department. The paid department didn't pan out, and do the normal school fire or something. They decided to go back to volunteer fire.
That was 1901.
How's that?
They and then when was it? Just a couple of years ago. Was it 2000 on the millennium that you actually in his honor helped to create the Arthur R. Maytum Fire Museum at the fire hall.
Well, your dad had something to do with that because what's his name? Pat Demore came to him, and they were trying to raise money to put a fire museum up, and Bob told me about it, and I said, well, we ought to be able to do that. Tell Pat not to go ask anybody else. So that was it.
When did the Maytums buy out the other 2 stockholders and you became the sole? Was that 1950?
53, we bought out Mr. Plato.
Okay.
And that threw the control into our hands rather than the Nixons. It could have gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
This is family consumption.
Right. 1948, there's a picture on your timeline called Dunkirk, Fredonia's first family of communication. And there is a picture of Gertrude Maytum Garland, Hildegard Maytum Strong, Virginia Whipple Maytum, Robert Maytum Sr., Arthur R. Maytum, and Robert Maytum Jr. Now, Gertrude and Hildegard, they were
daughters of A.R.
Okay.
And like my mother.
Mm-hmm.
But they were adopted sisters, but blood aunts.
Okay. And was your son destined to be part of the telephone company?
No.
No?
I didn't want him in the telephone company.
Right.
Well, I said, you've heard me come home and complain about all the things that go on there. I said, you don't want to be in the telephone business. So he actually tried hard to find another place to work. But it didn't pan out, so like my dad took me, I took him.
Yeah.
Simple.
Right. What's the highlight? As you reflect back on, I don't want to say 90 plus years, but what's
92 almost, if I can make it another a couple weeks. I'm 90, I'm 91, and 11 12ths.
That's right. Just about to the day, actually.
And the highlight, well, I don't have any highlights. It's all been good.
well, just a couple of things that jump out? Let's. We know that clearly one of your highlights was marrying Virginia.
Well, there's no question about that.
And of course, the second highlight is meeting Mr. Summer. We know that.
Yeah, that's been a long time friendship. That's for a good many years.
But from a professional viewpoint, as you look back, I mean, man, you're 60 plus years of telephone communications in this area. Is there an event or two where you'd say that was a seminal event in the history of your...
No, I think I love being a lineman, but you can't be a lineman and work in the office. I think that. I really liked that. I felt like I was getting paid for helping people, and you can't do any better than that.
Right.
I don't know. I really don't. It's all been good. There's been rough spots and better spots, but it's all been good.
Right.
You know, I've been. Well, it's hard to say. I've been tied up with Trinity Church for a long time. I've seen that little. And my great grandfather was Thomas Henry Prushaw, who was a Protestant Irishman, and he was a vestryman there in 1872.
Well, there you go.
And the grandkids were all baptized there, and so that just made 7 generations that belonged to Trinity Church in Fredonia. That I like.
Greg, you'll never achieve a recitation of his achievements because everybody will tell you this. He's never talked about his achievements.
Yeah.
He talks about what he perceives to be his warts, and he gets a great deal of satisfaction out of that. But he has never talked about his achievements.
I think if you don't mind me jumping in, Jim, one of his achievements, to be honest, is what, at least in my view, is what he's done for the State University College of Fredonia. And the number of kids who otherwise probably may not have been able to make it through school that he's helped put through school. And he doesn't talk about it a lot, but I'm going to talk about it for you.
Spending you guys' inheritance.
That's right, I know it. But you can't think of too much of a better way of doing it, I guess.
Greg doesn't have enough tape for you to tell about his achievements that you happen to know.
That's right.
Well, that's nice of you to say, but I hope that I merit it. Because I have weak spots like everybody else, but everybody doesn't see them.
Well,
we all have feet of clay to a certain extent.
You have continued, obviously something that your pa started, you continued, it's worked its way through your son, your grandsons. As you look today in 2003, what's the Maytum legacy to the village of Fredonia?
You know, there's an old poem. I don't know if I can remember it anymore, but it says, "Let me live in the house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. The men who are good, the men who are bad, as good and as bad as I." No, now wait a minute. I got to start that over again. Let me go back, reset.
Beautiful editing.
Let me live in the house by the side of the road, where the race of men go by. The men who are good, the men who are bad, as good and as bad as I. Let me live in the house by the side of the road. That's all I want to do.
And you succeeded well.
Well, I don't know if I have or not, but that's not exact quotation either. But
That's pretty good, though.
It's been a real privilege to know you and an honor to have been invited here to hear this tape, Bob.
well,
It's just a really
always
great
been-
event in my life. That
you've been an inspiration because you say those nice things to me, and your service to the community. So when somebody like you says to me, that your business runs good and you're doing things like good. You have no idea how that buoys me up.
Greg is going to edit.
Let me live in the
cut
house
this
with
off.
side.
So I'm confident that Greg will cut this off before it goes down to your children.
What?
Well, this is your day. Greg, would you turn that thing around again, please? Otherwise, I'll leave.
Otherwise, they need to know who's been the guy behind all this.
No, he really has been an inspiration to me. I think that a guy that's as smart as he is would think I was smart.
Yeah, see, the grandkids are gonna want to know who's the voice, you know? They'll know the Kurt.
Now let me see. Let me live in this house beside the road and be a friend of man. The men are good. Where the race of men goes by, the men are good, the men are bad, because bad's I. I would not sit in a scorner's seat, nor hurl a cynic's ban. Let me live in the house by the side of the road and be a friend of man. Now, you got it? There's more verses to that too. I looked it up on the computer. And I can't remember the other verses, but that's the one I know.
You talk about feet of clay, but actually you have lived your ideals. You live them every day.
Yeah, but you know, there's another, the same organization that I quoted something from a little while ago also says that you got to stand up, the theory of it is, this isn't exact wording, you got to stand up and be able to look in the mirror at yourself and say you did all right. I can't always say that. So,
Well, everybody else can for you.
well, that's nice, but I don't want to fool, I'm not fooling anybody. I'm not being a hypocrite because I'm telling you, there's things I've done that I wouldn't recommend. But I try not to violate the Ten Commandments, and that's about the basic thing.
This has been terrific.
Well, you guys are nice. I could spot on, but I'm not going to do it like that. But you've been real good to
You've
me.
been Mr. Fredonia for most of your 92 years.
You know, speaking of that, I'll tell you another thing, and I'm not bragging, but I got a letter from Frank Pagano. And you know, Frank likes the limelight pretty well himself. Frank told me, he says, he wrote me a note about something, and he said on the bottom of it, you are no doubt Fredonia's #1 citizen.
He had that right, even if he didn't get
Now,
everything right.
I've seen a day when there were people who would have not said that. So I've been up both sides of the fence. Like I say, I've been the best bench warmer that Fredonia High School ever had. I tried to be an athlete so hard.
You got another saying about the business that's pretty popular too, though. Matter of fact, I used it in my
What's that?
in my acceptance of the Business Person of the Year award. You remember
What was that?
when how you worked in the business from the bottom?
Oh, from the bottom of the hole to the top of the pole.
Yeah.
Oh, I learned that someplace. I learned another one too. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us hook prints on the poles we climb.
There you
There you go.
See, lives of linemen all remind us.
But we'll pick up part 2 some other time.
You-
We kind of worked our way to the-
I've had
We
fun,
also
but
kinda got married
I
in
hope
our
I haven't
lives.
bored you guys, because that's
Bored?
my favorite worry is boring people about talking, because sometimes when I get going, it's hard to shut me off. That's one of my advice.
That's
one
one
of my
of the best parts
vices.
about why we wanted to put you in front of the camera.
That's one of my vices.
You happen to be a
But I learned today what
Very
my,
photogenic.
very photogenic and a very walking historically appropriate person to
and a
have.
funny voice that I can't stand. If I hear my own voice, I am ready to, shoot the purveyor of the voice. This meeting's been worth a lot to me, and it's nice to get together with you and talk to you and have you take that much interest in me. But what my great-grandson said, that's nice too.
That's right.
That's right. That's,
I made an impression on a great.
I don't think that's on the record, so
No,
say
I-
what the great-grandson said.
Yeah, there's Christopher in his application to Allegheny College is chosen to write about his great-grandfather and how about he's been the biggest influence on his life.
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine.
there's a legacy.
Yeah, that is. I can't imagine it, but must have made more impression than I thought.